So I've done the thing where I compare series, and I like that. I'm going to keep doing that. I think they're good videos, and you guys clearly enjoyed them. But I think it'd also be interesting to try out comparing characters from different series. Take it to the personal level. Take it down to the ground. And so what we're going to do here is compare two amazing protagonists from the Wheel of Time and Stormlight Archive. And of course, because you read the title, that's RAND THOR and Kaladin Stormblessed. I have come up with 6 categories for these characters to be compared with as well. That is origin, development, relationships, interest, role, and overall power. I know that last category is kind of like not necessarily the best thing to compare two characters with. Like, I could just create a character that's God and they would win that every time, but it's my channel and I think it's fun. Now here's the thing. I made these 6 categories to compare series, and I've made 6 categories to compare characters. I don't necessarily think they're the greatest categories though. I'm kind of interested to see what you guys think I should be comparing either series or characters by. So let me know what you think I should add or take away when it's coming to these like versus matches.
Get on with it.
Without any further ado though, let's go ahead and jump into comparing these two amazing magic users. So first up we have origin. Now for RAND THOR, his origin falls into a lot of typical fantasy tropes to the point where he's literally a farm boy in a small town. In fact, he is the chosen farm boy from a small town, village, whatever. And this makes it kind of hard for him to pull away with this point. Yes, this is possibly one of the best executions of this trope of all time, but it is still a very unoriginal beginning for your main character. There's even the initiating incident, the wise wizard that takes him away and all that stuff. And yes, Wheel of Time is supposed to fall into these tropes. It's a fantasy series that's in love with fantasy. I don't want to take away from it, but when it comes to giving credit for this point, originality is a big factor, and Kaladin Stormblessed is quite original. Yes, he is also a chosen one from a village, but he's a surgeon's son, which is a little different, and he's not necessarily the chosen one, he's a member of many chosen. There's also an initiating conflict with a lord that sticks out a little bit as being something very personal and gets you on Kaladin's side early on, and I like how that's implemented. It makes you as the reader back Kaladin right away, and I think that was a great choice from Brandon Sanderson. Get the reader on the side of Kaladin at the beginning. It makes his internal conflicts later on have a lot more weight. On top of all of that, Kaladin's origin really extends on to his first few years as a soldier as well. This is a little bit different from Rand. As soon as he leaves the village, it feels like we're in his immediate story. Kaladin's past, though, continues on for quite a bit, and there's a lot of development within his origin, so for that, I'm giving Kaladin the first point. Next up we have development, and Wheel of Time's kind of unfair advantage really stands out here. The development of RAND THOR takes place across 14 books, and he is the focus of those 14 books for a large part of it. So because of all of that, Rand has a huge leg up for development, as well as coming from a young farm boy to a god. Can Kaladin really counteract that? He has developed quite a bit, and seeing him take on the leadership roles is very interesting, and some of the best executions of that kind of development I've ever seen. And having his overall development aided by Syl at his side really adds a level of charm to it that's just not there for Rand, but I don't think that's enough to make up for the fact that Rand is arguably one of the best developed characters of all time, not even just within the genre of fantasy. So the point here clearly goes to RAND THOR. Now next up we have relationships, and this one I actually changed who I gave the point to a couple of times. Relationships between characters is one of the most important part of reading any book. Rand's relationships to his main friends, while they are very important at the beginning, kind of take a hold for a large chunk of the middle of the series. He doesn't really hang around Perrin and Mat that much for a long time. He has his 3 love interests, but he spends by far the most of his time with men, and while their relationship is very charming, it's not by any means the best romance in fantasy. Kaladin, on the other hand, has an incredible relationship with Bridge 4. It's one of the best developments of brotherhood I've ever seen in my entire life. I absolutely love Bridge 4. In terms of brotherhood and fantasy, it might be king, rivaled only by the Blackguard from Lightbringer and Malazan in my experience. That being said, I remembered one important thing for RAND THOR when it comes to relationships. He has a relationship with nations, and he has a relationship with the Shadow and the Dark One, and the madness inside himself. These aspects of the character in terms of relationship are fascinating to me. One, Rand's relationship with nations really shapes the world around him and becomes integral and key. Rand's bias towards certain cultures is something he has to get over with, and it really aids to his character becoming more interesting. His relationship with the Shadow and him skirting closer and closer to it as the series progresses makes all of Wheel of Time feel like it has higher stakes. His relationship with the madness inside himself is something we spend a large portion of the Wheel of Time exploring. It's fascinating having that madness slowly develop into the character that is Luz Theron. Because of this internal relationship and Rand's relationships with the world and different cultures and nations, especially the Aiel, I didn't even get into that, I have to take them into account, and I give the point here to Rand al'Thor. This is kind of a begrudging point though, and I was originally going to give it to Kaladin, but taking in the full scope of the setting of all their relationships, Rand has to take it.
Alrighty then.
Now it's going to come to the overall interest of the character. Who is the better page turner when it comes to character? But at the beginning of the Wheel of Time, Rand is absolutely one of the most interesting characters. That being said, as the series progresses, Rand can take a back seat at times, and other characters certainly become the better page turner. As the series comes to a close, Rand steps back up under the masterful hand of Brandon Sanderson and really does start being the driving force again. You really become emotionally invested in Rand, and I think that's the biggest page turner for him. We don't really know how stable he is, and it does feel like he can fall off at any time. If Rand did kind of go over the edge, we know the world would kind of come to an end. His stakes are certainly higher than Kaladin, but let's look at what makes Kaladin such an interesting character. When we're first introduced to Kaladin, he's at his most broken, and it's about redemption. He goes through one of the most interesting arcs I've ever read in the first book of Stormlight Archive. Going from a prisoner to the leader of other prisoners to a redeemed hero of this army is absolutely masterfully executed. That being said, for the next two books, Kaladin kind of loses some interest. In the second Stormlight book, he certainly is still very interesting, but in the third, I found my interest in Kaladin to be falling off quite a bit. This could certainly come back, and it's a little unfair for me to be comparing an unfinished character to someone who has finished, but this is all for good fun, and taking all of that into account, I'm gonna hand it to Rand by a hair.
Yeah, and you're ugly.
There's going to be a caveat on this point that Kaladin could certainly, as the series progresses, take over this point and actually pull the win here. Rand certainly has the biggest lead of any Versus videos I've ever done, but let's go ahead and jump into the role of the world that they're in. Now, Rand's role here is super integral. He's literally the chosen one. If he fails, the world ends. That's a big role. But is it that interesting of a role, and is it something that I find super compelling? Not really. While I do love the character of Rand himself, I don't like Chosen One characters that much. They're always super predictable, and while Rand does kind of subvert the tropes of being the Chosen One at times, he falls into a majority of them very clearly. Kaladin, on the other hand, is a lot more chaotic when it comes to his potential. He's not done yet, but his role is already very interesting. Kind of being the warrior for the group of Chosen Ones is a great place for him to be, and I think it fits the series fantastically. I'm actually going to give the point of role here to Kaladin because I think the potential here and what we're going to see him develop into is going to be something major, and I'm really excited for it. And while Rand's I found a little boring at time, and I've yet to find Kaladin's role in this world to be boring at all. Just to make it clear, role is not about whose role is more important, it's about which role is more interesting to follow. And now it comes down to power. Who would win if these two went at it in a fight? Quite obviously, Rand al'Thor. He kind of ends as a god.
I have exorcised the demons.
And in Kaladin's current state, he's just a really great warrior with a whole lot more potential. And once again, I guess Kaladin could eventually take this point, but I highly doubt it. So Rand al'Thor is gonna take the victory here. That was a lot of fun to do, guys, and I'm interested to see what you think of my kind of character versus series. You guys have clearly enjoyed me comparing different series, and I think the character one has its own charm as well. It's definitely much different than comparing series. I want you guys to comment down below who you think I should compare next. There's a few options here I'm considering. Landman Dragoman versus Dalinar, Matt Cawthon versus Locke from Gentlemen Bastards, Vin from Mistborn versus Khaleesi, or many, many more options. I'd love to know what your thoughts are down below. If I see a great idea, there will be a video of it probably tomorrow. When it comes to series comparison, there's going to be a couple more of those coming down the road as well, and some character examinations. I'm not currently reading a book, unfortunately, just due to my crazy chaotic work life have taken a turn, so I'm not gonna be able to get a review up anytime soon. But looking at my recent book review counts, that's not bothering most of you. You guys like it when I talk about fantasy series that you know, and I'm fine with that. My next up book to read though is the second book in A Song of Ice and Fire, so be looking out for that. That being said, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to support what I do here. There's a Patreon link down below if you're feeling incredibly generous. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Thank you again to the band Starless for providing me with intro music. You guys are fantastic, and I hope you all are having a wonderful